We have this habit of thinking that history, real history with meaning and all that, starts with the written word, with sacred texts. But what if that's not the beginning of the story at all? What if it's just one chapter in a much, much older book? Today, we're going to dig way past recorded history and ask, what was the world like before the word?
I mean, it's a pretty common idea, right? That without scripture, without some kind of divine revelation, the world was just chaotic, meaningless. That morality and order were things that had to be handed down to us. But what if that whole idea is backwards? What if humanity was already wrestling with the big questions and finding its own answers, long before anyone wrote them down?
Think about it. So many of our foundational myths start right there. A god speaks, and bam, there's light, there's order, there's purpose. It's a powerful narrative. But history, well, the story that history tells, the one written in bone and stone and ancient dust, it starts in a very different place.
So to find that story, we have to travel back, way back. We're going to explore a world that existed long before any recorded divine speech, a time when meaning wasn't read from a scroll, but was lived and felt and created every single day. This idea, wow, it just changes everything, doesn't it? It suggests that revelation wasn't some starting gun for human meaning. No, it was more like a latecomer to a party that had already been raging for tens of thousands of years. The world was already full of answers. Okay, so you might be wondering, how on earth do we know that? We don't have books from 50,000 years ago, but we have something else. We have clues. Powerful, silent clues left behind by our most ancient ancestors. So let's become archaeologists for a minute. Just look at this timeline. The scale here is absolutely mind-blowing. We see the first clear signs of symbolic acts, people intentionally burying their dead, around 50,000 BCE. Then you get this explosion of sophisticated cave art. But the first written sacred texts, they don't show up until around 3000 BCE. That's a gap of more than 45,000 years. An unbelievable stretch of time where humans were making sense of their world without a single written word to guide them. And this is what they were doing in that vast expanse of time. I mean, think about it. When you intentionally bury someone, maybe with a tool or an ornament, you're not just disposing of a body. You are saying something. You're thinking about memory, about loss, about what comes next. And this incredible art deep inside caves, this wasn't just doodles to pass the time. This was story. This was ritual. This was a way of connecting with the spiritual world. And all of this, every single clue, points to one incredibly profound human capacity: symbolic thought. It's the ability to make one thing stand for something else entirely. A carved piece of mammoth ivory isn't just a carving. It represents a spirit. A burial isn't just a hole in the ground. It represents a belief about life and death. This is the very bedrock of culture, and our ancestors had it mastered millennia before anyone thought to write things down. Okay, so it wasn't just about personal, spiritual feelings. This ancient meaning-making was also building the very foundations of society itself. Things like myth, morality, authority, they all have roots that go way deeper than we think. Right. Long before any one person claimed to have a direct line to the divine, humanity already had its grand narratives. You could say myths were kind of like the original software for the human brain. They explained everything from why the sun rises to why we feel pain. They were the instruction manuals for reality. And what's just fascinating is when you look at these myths from all over the world, you see the same themes popping up again and again. Stories about how the world began, a great flood that wiped the slate clean, a hero who sacrifices themselves for the greater good. These ideas weren't invented by later religions. They were part of a shared ancient vocabulary of meaning that was already old when the first scriptures were being composed. Now, this slide here is absolutely key to understanding what happened. Before Revelation, morality wasn't a divine command. It was a social necessity. You just have to have rules if you want to live together without chaos. Authority wasn't a mandate from a god. It was based on who was respected or strong or wise. Revelation didn't invent these concepts. It took these pre-existing social structures and gave them a divine seal of approval. It reframed them. And the evidence for this is just, well, it's overwhelming, 100%. Every single human society that has ever been studied, whether they had a formal theology or not, had a moral code, rules about fairness, about cooperation, about not harming others. This isn't a religious invention. It's a human universal, born from the simple, practical need to get along and survive together.
So this all leads us to a really big question, right? If all of this meaning-making, all this morality and myth was already in place, then what exactly did Revelation do? What was its role when it finally showed up?
This is the answer, and it reframes everything so perfectly. Scripture wasn't the start of the river, it was a photograph of the river. Imagine thousands of years of stories and beliefs and oral traditions, all flowing and changing and evolving. A sacred text is what happens when someone builds a dam, takes a snapshot, and says, this is the truth.
Exactly. This puts it even more clearly. Sacred texts didn't create meaning from thin air. They took the vast, messy, living traditions that came before and condensed them. They boiled them down into a fixed, written form. They are the highlight reel of a much, much longer story.
So you can basically see it as a three-step process. First, you start with this incredibly rich world of human-made meaning that's been around forever. Then, a religious movement comes along and selects certain stories, certain rules, and codifies them, writes them down. It makes them official. And then comes the final, crucial step. It claims divine authorship. What was once human is now reframed as coming directly from a god.
So, what's the big takeaway here? What does this mean for us today? Well, it means that our search for purpose, for meaning, is part of a story that is so much older, so much more deeply human than we often realize.
If you remember just one thing from all of this, let it be this. Meaning wasn't a package delivered to a clueless humanity from on high. It's our inheritance. It was forged in the firelight of ancient camps, painted on cave walls, and passed down through countless generations who looked up at the same stars and asked the very same questions we're still asking. And really, that's what it all comes down to. When you wonder about your purpose, or what it means to be a good person, or how we should all live together, you're not starting a new conversation. You're just adding your voice to the oldest and most important conversation our species has ever had.